أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وفرج نبيهم. In this informal discussion that we just had, we started talking about the idea of learning and education, correct? And I showed you that as soon as a tree becomes bigger, it has a shadow to it. As soon as the quantitative reach of a particular educational method became bigger, right? The qualitative capacity of that particular method, in some senses, declined. Okay. This particular concept of when something grows in magnitude or is greater in intensity, then the fall of that, the deficiencies of that, the shadow of that, ends up typically being proportional to that particular greatness. Am I using big words? I have a really bad habit. You gotta tell me. Yes? Yes? Okay, you're good so far? Okay. So when particular intensities of things goes higher and higher, the shadow of things becomes greater and greater. You want to see in certain areas this particular thing. Well, let's say a moving train. Well, as the speed and the velocity of that particular train increases, the mechanism and the friction and the power required to, for example, stop it is greater. And if it, God forbid, derails, the damage it causes is proportional to the velocity that particular train had. You see that? But the potential fall, the potential deficits are proportional to the magnitudes and intensities of whatever you're dealing with. Okay. The same thing goes for sunlight, for example. Right? When the sunlight is here in our backyard, we can't even cook an egg on it, right? But if you were to be, let's say, 1 millimeter away from the sun, forget the egg, the frying pan, and the person trying to cook would be also like charcoaled, right? As the intensities grow, the effects and impacts of them increase as well. In the negative, because they are there in the positive. Okay. Let's look at certain historical examples now too. Shaitan, in terms of magnitude of how long he worshipped Allah, we're told 5,000 years, and the Ma'soom says we don't know if it was the dunyavi 5,000 years or the ukhravi 5,000 years. See that? To the point where he became buddies with the angels. So the magnitude of that thing grows, right? And then all of a sudden the potential decline and the shadow of it also grows. And hence this particular thing, with the magnitude that he reached, is now something that is trying to corrupt all of humanity till Qiyamah. You see that? So the more velocity a train picks up, a derailment of that train will create a lot more problem. Yes or no? Okay. If I have a spark, the bigger the container of petrol I put close to it, the bigger the correct? Okay. Last session we talked about a very important idea, and we talked about what? And anybody listen to the last session? The strength within her? If you didn't, put your hand up so I will recap some of the major themes. 1, 2, 3. Yeah? Want me to recap it? 2? Yeah. Okay. So we talked about the idea of emotional intensities. We said, well, which gender has higher emotions? We said, well, women have higher emotions than men. Okay? And we said, does that mean that they're emotionally weak? We said, no, it means they're emotionally strong. Why? Because we said, well, look at a percentage analysis. Okay? If I have 1% of this coffee cup over here spill into this room, right? It's not a huge deal, right? But if I have 1% of the ocean spill into this room, what happens? Okay? You can't necessarily determine control mechanisms by simply looking at the magnitude of the emotion. You see that? Because the control mechanism is something that's a ratio of the amount of things you're controlling, right? And the error that particular thing is, spilling over. You see that? So if in women, the emotions are of a greater magnitude, right? And that's a good thing, right? The control mechanism also is proportionate to that. However, do spills happen? Yes, just like for men. But the thing is, sometimes for women, the spills end up taking on a greater display, not because the mechanism of control is weaker or that they're weaker, it's because the sheer magnitude that you're talking about is greater. Does that make sense? So a 1% spill in the ocean looks like a whole lot bigger than a 50% spill of a coffee cup. You see that? Okay. So that's the theme that I wanted to kind of focus on. Last session we looked at it from all aspects of family roles that a woman would play. A daughter's role, a sister's role, a wife's role, and a mother's role. Okay? There were some aspects we didn't cover, like a grandmother and so on and so forth, or a grandchild, but we kept it to the nuclear family unit. Okay? The theme I started off with today was what? That the greater the velocity of that train is, when it derails, what happens? The greater the impact ends up becoming, correct? Okay. And the theme and the title of today is what? What's the title today? Huh? The rest of weakness upon her strength. Okay. This strength that women have, which is in the quantitative aspect of emotions and the control mechanism of it, right? This magnitude of emotions and the control aspects of it. Well, this particular strength comes with a shadow too, just like every other strength. Imagine you had a lot of physical strength to the point where you could bend metal just by touching it like this, correct? Your normal day life would become torture. You want to open the door for someone, you open a little bit and it goes flying away. Okay? You want to shake someone's hand and you rip their arm off. You see that? So when magnitudes of certain traits grow and increase, as they're increasing, if a person isn't aware of that and they project that everybody else is on the same playing field, what happens up happening? Uh-oh. See that? So as the magnitudes of these emotions increase, right, then the shadow becomes proportional to that. Are you seeing the trend? I tried to show it to you like in like normal human day life, in like nature, in like different traits that we have like strength, and I'm suggesting that a similar thing occurs in emotions too. If you're understanding that, salawat, please. Can somebody recap what I just said? Go ahead. There's a microphone right in front of you.
I guess to put it short, everything is proportionate.
Okay.
So the more strength you put into something, the more, it's going to output, right? So, I mean, that's how I understand it.
Yeah, and the aspect that I was highlighting is that the faster the velocity of a train is, the greater the damage is going to be if it, God forbid, derails, correct? So the stronger a particular trait ends up being in a human being, the more they have to be aware that if that particular trait derails, the impact is going to be proportionate to the magnitude of that particular trait. And I gave the example of physical strength first. If I could bend metal with my hands, then opening a door for somebody, I was trying to be polite to them and open the door, I end up ripping the door apart. Trying to shake their hand and be nice, I rip their arm off. You see that? So if I simply wasn't aware of the magnitude of that particular trait that I have, then that might lead me to, unfortunately, outcomes which I might not be really wanting. You see that? Okay. I shifted and connected that to last session's talk, which was, what is a fundamental strength in women? Emotions, correct? Okay. So the fundamental particular item and trait that we looked at was emotions. So wait a second. Just because the magnitude of that emotion is great doesn't mean that they have a weakness in it. Actually, they have strength in it, right? The spill of a 1% ocean looks very, very large compared to a 50% spill of a cup. And again, that means that control mechanism is proportionate as well. We're all on the same page now. Going forward, if a person believes that how they experience the world is how normalcy is for everybody else as well, okay? If the projection of normalcy is simply based off of my experience, what ends up happening? Anybody want to help me? You see what the question is? Okay. So what ends up happening?
So everyone has different perspectives,
Sure.
right? So when we think, assume everyone is looking at one thing the same way, that is wrong because everyone has their own experience and that makes it different. So you shouldn't assume, is what I'm guessing.
Okay. You're saying, okay, wait a second. Look, everybody has a different particular perspective. If I put a cup on this side, you can only see that aspect of it. If that aspect ends up being yellow and this side is red, well, you're going to claim that the cup is yellow and I'm going to claim the cup is red, and uh, um, we're going to have trouble. Because if you're going to project your max understanding onto reality and expect that that is the exact thing for everybody else, then we're in trouble. You took it to the realm of understandings and knowledge. Okay, I want to bring it to the realm of emotion. Okay, uh, there's a certain dynamics in the educational realm that we can get to later on, but I want to control in emotions, and I want you to compare it with strength first. If I thought everybody is as strong as I am, and I happen to be the Hulk, what ends up happening then? For everybody else living around me, correct? Okay. So, uh, remember the last time we talked about the family role that a female plays in a nuclear family unit? A daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother. Okay. What happens if on in those particular roles, her understanding is that everybody's on the same playing field in terms of emotional magnitudes and emotional sensitivities?
The people who have weaker emotional capacity would be overlooked in a way or not considered. Because if women have stronger emotional capacity and then the person you're not considering other variants of that.
Very good. I'm going to use this analogy. Pay very close attention to this. All of you have a color palette, okay? And this color palette is one of those really intense ones that you have on like a cool graphic software, right? Where it's like thousands of potential hues and colors and those hexagons and so on and so forth, okay? And the other person in that particular situation, right, ends up having a color palette that's like a kid's crayon, red, blue, green, yellow. Let's say, okay, and go ahead. Sorry.
Should I ask after?
Sure, I can continue the analogy later on. Go ahead.
It was a question I had because I saw this it was a podcast, right? And it recently talked about emotions in different genders. And basically they were talking about people say women are more emotional, which is true. But I always wondered most crimes or murders, usually 90% of the time are committed by men, and that's because they have anger. Because if you kill someone, you have anger towards them, right? It's wouldn't they be considered more emotional? It's a question I just had.
Very good question. Remember what I just told you? I said 1% spill of a particular ocean. Like you have to look at it proportionately, correct? So women, that magnitude of emotion that they have, and the control mechanism is proportionate to that. Okay. Um, Men have a particular magnitude, and the control mechanism is proportionate to that. Okay. Uh, but men have other traits within them as well that lead them towards a particular type of display. Okay. Women have other traits that lead them to a different type of display. Where do men find the idea of strength? They typically find it in physical strength. Okay. And then when it comes time to display strength, because that's what the anger faculty does, anger faculty will try to push away that which it doesn't feel is nice for itself, okay? So when a man is asked to push away something, it utilizes the thing which it feels naturally is kind of the default thing, and it physically pushes it through. Okay? Where the crimes that women would commit, if we had a radar for that, wouldn't be physical in nature. Yeah? A knife cuts such that you can heal from that wound in a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month. But emotions can, and words and mechanisms of relationships can cut a person that they go crazy. It cuts for life. Okay? But we don't have a police for that in the physical world. You understand? So if we were to look at criminals only based off of the governmental laws, they typically catch the murderers of the physical body, right? But they don't catch the murderers of the nafs. If I was to take crime in that particular mechanism, I would say the greatest murderers are women. You understand? Yes or no? Salawat, please. Okay, talking about color palettes. You have this unique color palette that has basically like thousands of potential colors and hues and so on and so forth in it, okay? And each one of them has this code to it. You know, basically that means what? You can say this is this and this is not this, and you can distinguish between different hues. And the other person in that particular relationship ends up being what? Has a blue, red, like a kid's crayon pencil. Blue, red, yellow, green, that's it. Okay? And then what ends up happening is you say, I need green XYZ 2. And that particular person brings green. Okay? Like, that's not it at all. And the guy's like, where did I mess up? This is green. Right? You understand what I'm trying to say? Your intensity and magnitude, if you thought that that was a normalcy and the same subtleness that you have in understanding emotion and feeling emotion and projecting emotions, if you felt that was a norm and that the other also had that same particular strength, right? The rubric you'd make for them would be based off of your own self, which is actually defaultly very normal, huh? If you did anything otherwise, I'd be scared. The default state is that, correct? Okay. This whole talk is to make us appreciate that perhaps that's not the case in the two genders. Okay? When it comes to setting up a rubric for the other gender, the greater the strength that you have, right, all of a sudden that ends up having a particular shadow to it too. You see that? This particular talk was about setting up rubrics regarding that other person in the relationship, whether you're a daughter towards a father, whether you are a sister towards a brother, whether you are a wife towards a husband, whether you are a mother towards a son. You see this? Salam, please. What did I just say? Who? What did I just say? See, this is your talk. It's a two-directional talk, inshallah. What did I just say? Go ahead, yeah, ask questions.
Based on how you go into certain relationships, and that if you have, like, if you're going into something, or like a relationship or something, and you have like this vibrant and subtle and very color palette, versus someone who might not have that diversity, then in that case, when you impose upon them the standards of normalcy that you find within yourself, you're going to end up putting a lot of pressure and like undue expectations. Is basically.
Yes.
Could you sum that up as like undue expectations?
The first stages of expectations, but it doesn't stop there, right? What happens when your expectations get broken? But where is that projected? In what sense you feel that you're not valuable in their eyes? Yes or no? Is that a natural projection of that? One way of looking at it in the flip is that I would have given them green hue XYZ1 2. They gave me green X2YZ1 3. You understand? You see what I'm trying to say? That if you because you're trying to do unto others as you'd have others do unto you, correct? But I'm saying that it doesn't work very nicely if you're not appreciative of the fact that, the magnitudes are different. Okay? If a Baba who eats 3 plates of food for dinner, let's say, says, do unto others as you have others do unto you, and this infant in front of me, I'm going to feed him 3 plates of food, what happens? The kid goes, pops. Kulu washrabu hatta tanfajiru. Okay, you see what I'm trying to say? So that particular expectation thing is a starter in terms of friction. But then when your relationship continues and you're not figuring out why this person keeps failing, you sometimes feel that they actually hate the subject, which is me, and they have no value for me, and this continues forward. But you had a greater magnitude of emotion, correct? That means that internal turmoil is also felt at its own magnitude. If I put a little wave in this ocean, okay, it's not a big deal. If I put a little bit of a wave in the actual ocean, it's a tsunami, correct? So then, when that particular magnitude gets riled up, it's a lot harder to control as well. Do you see this particular thing? Let me bring you some religious ahadith which kind of show that it's not, I'm just not bringing it out of my pocket. Okay? There's a hadith that talks about the shahwat faculty, the faculty of desire. Okay? This shahwat faculty is a faculty which basically says everything you like, you want to kind of bring it close to you. Okay? So if I like, right now I'm a little bit thirsty, I want to bring this particular thing close to my lips and drink. That want that I had towards that, right, is driven by the shahwat faculty. You see that? Okay. So it says that the shahwat within the female gender is 10 times that of the male gender. Do you understand that? You have to understand that the nafs is a proportional and proportionate item. If the shahwat faculty is 10 times, then other faculties are proportionately appropriated to that particular faculty. Do you understand? Okay. So when you are in a relationship and you like somebody, like your father, like your brother, like your husband, like your son, okay? Which faculty is at play? Shahwat faculty. Okay. So if the shahwat faculty of a lady is 10 times, right, then that means that that particular magnitude has to be understood appropriately. They have to know they're the hulks. Otherwise, everybody else shaking their hands, they're going to have broken hands. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay. Does anybody, whenever you disagree with what I'm saying or you think it's fluff, you just got to say, Saeed, you're fluffing. And you have to ask questions. Okay? So let's look at it now in specific in terms of, for example, the daughter and father relationship. Go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick question. So if it's the case that the women have like this larger emotional capacity and stuff like that, and they have to kind of be really mindful about how they project that onto other people, or like how they manage that. What's kind of like the equivalent in men? Like what's the thing that they kind of
Ahsan.
is the
Ahsan. I do couples counseling. I'll start with there, and I'll give you examples from other relationships too. In couples counseling, the sister would come and say, "He hit me." I go to the guy and say, "You hit her?" They're like, "No, I just grabbed, just grabbed." His understanding of hitting is, do you understand? His understanding of physical aggression is proportionate to what his normalcy in that is. And if a guy just did that, he would never go around saying he hit me. He'd say, grab me. He has a larger palate when it comes to physical aggression. You understand that? Okay, you grabbed me, you hit me, you bruised me, or whatever. Okay. So default state, without the intellect coming in and shedding light to the very minute details, the emotion in of itself, by default for him, the palate is more sensitive in physical aggression. You understand that? And hence, he didn't even see that as a physical aggression towards the sister. But in marriage counseling, he hit me really bad. And then I asked, are you talking about the same scenario? Yeah, sure. Okay, I see. Brother, that is not okay for you. You think that is just shaking up someone, but that is actually, in her understanding, a full-on hit. Okay. Other times, a sister and brother, for example, they will fight later on. So I have kids. Later on, come back, and the son says, I just held on to her hand really tightly, and that's it. And I look at the girl's hand, and it's red. Like, how tightly do you hold on to the girl's hand? Do you understand? What ends up happening is the person is projecting what they think is like, yeah, this is standard okay. Okay? I throw the ball at 20 kilometers an hour because I can catch it at that level, and I think you can too, and I throw it towards a toddler and uh-oh, right? So if I'm projecting the magnitude and the strength that I have and think that to be the normalcy for everybody else, I'm in trouble. This is the exact same thing I told to you guys right now in the beginning. So I have a bad habit of using big words. Why? Because I spent a lot of time reading big words and then didn't practice using small words in normal settings, and then all of a sudden, I fell into trouble. You see that? So if I don't proportionately, understand the scenario that I'm in, what's going on, then I become somebody who's in trouble. You see that? The same thing is quite unique in almost every level. Okay? So the daughter-father relationship, what happens there? Daughter has an immense love for dad, okay? And their mechanism of love, right, is something unique to them, and their display of love is something unique to them as well, okay? But Baba is not necessarily them, okay? So what ends up happening is Baba's magnitude and display of that particular love is proportionate to Baba. If daughter tries to make sure that Baba's passing line is when he can kind of display love and magnitude at my expectations level, Baba's going to be in trouble 9 out of 10 times. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Many times a daughter would say, that was a very inconsiderate comment. I wouldn't have said this, and I wouldn't have said that. It's true. If Baba happened to be, na'uzubillah, it's reality now, a female, then that particular female Baba might have projected emotions at that particular level. You see that? But in Islam, we're not loopy, we're Salim, and Baba happens to be a male. Okay? So that particular action that Baba is going to have in the house is going to be appropriate to the natural fitra of Baba. Are you guys following along with what I'm saying? So if that particular expectation is not met, what ends up happening is the daughter has a understanding of Baba in a way where this guy doesn't care. He's not considerate. You see that? She's expecting a palate from the Baba at her capacity. And you'll notice that this particular trend will increase at what age? It'll be closer to the teenage years. You understand? Why? This is where the shahwat faculty is finding its true magnitude come to light. Okay? And then the shahwat sensitivities are developing, and the capacity for picking up those subtle nuance differences is being found by that particular person. And then what ends up happening is when they see the other people making a mistake, it becomes a lot easier. Okay? Yes, go ahead.
touch from him is so deep for me. So how I should handle it's always a problem. So apparently there is a problem because they are not in balance. With some side there is some more base. So
Yes.
how we should
Yes. I'll give you this analogy from the aspect of us tullab, Hawza students. Okay? When we go to the Hawza and we learn Islam, we learn the nitty-gritty aspects of things and so on and so forth, and we come back and we can find a flaw in anything. Anything. Any Husseiniya you go to, you're a talaba, you've studied the deen properly, any lecture you listen to, absolutely anything except for the Quran, inshallah. You can find a particular critique or criticism. Why? Because your capacity of understanding has increased, right? And you're like, you can see where there's deficiencies. You see that? That's where people will be like, other individuals will be like, I'm very religious, and that Hawza student might be like, wait a second, I have to reconsider this. What do they mean by religious? You see that? You see what I'm trying to say? Okay. And all of a sudden, what ends up happening is, if a person is not aware of this deficiency and this magnitude kind of discrepancy, it can lead to a very dark and negative outlook on everything. The whole world is dark. You end up being the sun. Okay? If you're looking, if the sun was to see the universe from its aspect, right? What ends up happening? The whole world is dark. You see that? So when it comes time to regulating our emotions, right? Which faculty is the regulator? The aql. I'm opening up a particular talk here which is fundamental. Okay? I'm opening up this particular talk specifically because I feel like now that it's a good time to open it up. Okay? In the West, there's a difference between intelligence quotient IQ and EQ, correct? Where emotions and intellect are seen as two separate items, correct? Yes or no? In Islam, that's not the case. When I tell intellect that, oh, intellect, control shahwat and ghadab. Okay? When can you control something? Look to this. Allah told the parents, control your kids, correct? Allah told the owner of money to control their money, correct? Allah told the husband to control his house unit, correct? Okay. Allah told the hakim to control the mahkum, correct? In every aspect of control, there is a hierarchy placed such that the hierarchy encompasses that which is below it at some level. Do you understand? The only way you can control your shahwat and your ghazab is if you understand what the correct balance of that shahwat and that ghazab is. And you can only truly understand that because a conceptual understanding is very different than a huzuri and experiential understanding. And the only way the aql can actually control the shahwat and control the ghazab is if it has a very real and actual understanding of ghazab and shahwat. You see that? The only way you can control your kids is that you know them like the back of your hand. Otherwise, theoretically saying children should sleep on time is great, but what does that look like for my kid? And how do I project that onto my kid? I can only do that if I know explicitly speaking what that kid is like. Does that make sense? So in Islamic understanding, intellect and emotions aren't as distinct as how the West projects it. Here's one of the problems that happens when you look at them as distinct things. People who become really, really intellectually smart in their understanding, quote unquote, okay, intellectually smart, sometimes use that as a mask to say, yeah, that's why I'm not emotionally smart. Whereas the real intellectual person is somebody who caters to the emotions. Does that make sense? Okay? A real intellectual person who's able to understand and pick up on the nuances of emotions. This is a very important concept, and it's a fundamental concept. Okay? This fundamental concept has a lot of deep roots. Alhamdulillah had recently had a talk with one of the scholars in town about this. It is really unique. It displays itself even in how the English majalises. You'll notice that the crying portions are different than in, for example, different majalises, because the sub-layer cultural understandings of intellect and emotions are distinct. If you look at displays of emotion in the West, if somebody cries, they always say, "What? Excuse me." It's almost like crying is a deficiency and a negativity and a bad thing. You see that? TV anchor cries, "Excuse me." In a funeral as well, only the mom or the dad or the brother will cry, and even then when they tear up and the speech ends, and "Excuse me," and go to the side. Crying and the display of that particular emotion is seen as a negativity. You see that? Okay. Whereas in the Islamic understanding, the more intellectual you are, the more you cry. Do you understand that? Whereas Amir al-Mu'minin, the manifestation of intellect, cries to the point where someone knocks on the door of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra and said, "I think he's died." He said, "This is his habit." Do you understand? This distinction of intellect and emotion in the Western paradigm has led to a great misunderstanding at the fundamental layer regarding displays of emotion, where emotion and the displays of it is something that's kept far away from intellect. Do you understand that? Where Islam is saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, certain displays of emotions are not correct. It's true. But that does not mean that emotions should not be displayed. Don't be pressure cookers. The intellect understands that emotions need to be displayed, and then because it understands emotions. Okay? Why? Because they're the fruits on its tree, if you will. Okay? They belong to it, and hence it's been told to control them. Okay? And then it's able to then appropriately say, yes, this apple is ripe, now consume it. You see that? So, please. Why did I mention this whole tangential point? Well, I mentioned this particular point for you and you. Okay, this was something that was an underlying mechanism of understanding emotions and intellect in a particular manner. Okay, but it links to our point as well. Why? Because when you have a sister now in the family unit as a daughter, relationship with the father, right? She has to understand that emotional magnitude and expectation is something very real. And answering your question now, the intellect has to come and give her appreciation of this. That yes, I am able to find nuanced understandings in certain things that that person isn't able to pick up. Okay? What that means is that there might be a deficiency in that particular person. I shouldn't equate all deficiencies in the lack of love. My toddler can't talk to me the same way I can talk to him. I guarantee you that toddler loves me like crazy. Okay? Simply not being able to communicate and project a particular emotion in that accurate manner is a problem. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the other person has no appreciation of you. It's important to understand. Did that answer your question slightly? The end portion. The beginning biryani I cooked was for a different reason altogether. All right. So the first level is of expectations between the daughter and the father. Another area where this daughter will have difficulties is when she sees the father talking to the mother or talking to other family members in a way where she's like, wait a second, this is not how I'd do things. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? And that what ends up happening is that the projection of that particular role becomes more tarnished than it should be as well. Okay? If you're thinking that this means that give the other person the benefit of the doubt and turn the other cheek, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying when you want to determine the control mechanism of this coffee, you have to understand what percentage of it spilt over. So you have to appreciate both the magnitude of it, right? And compare the spill of it in proportion to the magnitude of that. Which means that when that particular person messes up, understand who is it that is messing up. Okay? What emotional sensitivity and magnitude does that particular person have? Are you following with me so far? Is it very boring for you? Yes, I'm sorry. That's all I have. Salawat, please. Second relationship was of the sister and the brother. Okay? What bothers you? You have a brother? Imagine a person has a brother. What would bother them about their brother? Sorry? Sorry? Extra freedom, right? Sant. Why did they get extra freedom? No. It's not because parents are crazy. Why do they get extra freedom? What does freedom look like? What does freedom mean? Are they free to go out and kill someone? No. What does freedom mean? Okay. So freedom in our household responsibilities. What's much? He has to sleep, he has to eat. What's much? Open the box of much. Okay, so Ahsant. Ahsant. Let's start here. Ahsant. So look, the items that are mentioned are items that are associated at that particular comparative level. Do you understand? What was not mentioned? Earn a living. Why? Because at that particular level of sister, it's not expected that the sister or they don't expect themselves to earn, and then they say, well, here the brother doesn't have that expectation too, and then they say, well, the rubric that's for me should be for that particular person as well. Okay. Fitratan, mama and baba are trying to develop their kids towards being mamas and babas as well. You understand? Fitratan. Okay. If there's a deficiency in understanding what babas do in the house, then there will be a deficiency in understanding what the betas do in the house too. You understand? I'm not sidelining that. That, I said it first, park it to the side. Okay? Compare this and understand this particular thing. That when you say that they have more freedom, right? Mamas and babas, if I was to say that go out, take the trash out at night time as a baba, I'd be much more comfortable telling my son to go take it out than my daughter. Why? Why? Same age. Why? Why? I'm stronger because I'm a sexist person, that's why. Is that why?
And I guess, women should be more protected.
Fitratan, Allah has made me understand that I have to protect an individual where I suspect that there might be weakness. Okay? So when I send my kid outside, my son outside to take the garbage, if somebody brought a microphone to me, said, are you scared someone's going to be outside? They're going to bully them by words, and that's why you're sending your son out? Like, no. The security that I'm thinking of is of a physical nature. You understand? Okay? Naturally speaking, my fitra says that my daughter in the physical realm doesn't have that particular strength, but my son does. Do you understand that? And then I'd be like, son, you go do this and that. Do you know what I'm saying? Is this thought pattern happening in your mind? Probably not. It's a thought pattern that happens through your fitra. Meaning that unless you're aware of that particular mechanism of thought, unless you have ilm, you won't understand that you actually have this particular ilm in your fitra, and that's why you're making certain decisions. Okay? And when you're not cautious and conscientious of that, you end up exaggerating in one way or the other way those same decisions. Okay? And then all Islam says is, Azizam, that same fitrah thing that you had, just bring balance to it. Have ilm of your ilm, that's it. Okay? The Western projection of that particular thing ends up being, he sucks, he just thinks that these two particular genders, women are this and men are that, and one is lower and the other is that. This one needs to be confined and chained, and that one can be free and a bird. It's not the case. Okay? Another way of looking at freedom is, what do I keep out in the open and easily that anybody can access, and what do I protect and make sure that it's not accessible easily? Okay. When it comes time to my kids' friends coming to the house, I make sure I pack away my laptop and my books as far away as I can. Okay. But when it comes to, let's say, water and toys and other things, okay, just be there. Things that I hold of great value, right, are things that I'd kind of protect. You understand that? Okay. When it comes time to now the fitri nature of a father towards his daughter, if he sees that particular daughter is something that he has this level of love, okay? Okay, I have a daughter and I have a son, okay? I come home and it's not my son I'm looking forward to. This son is unique, huh? This son, I come home, he kisses my hand, takes my shoes, he's 8 years old, puts it aside. He doesn't go to bed without kissing my hand. Not a single night. Okay? A daughter's not like that. Daughters are riled up sometimes. Okay? But believe me, I come home, right? And it's not my son's smile that brings coldness to my heart. Okay? Because he has a color palette of yellow, blue, and red, and that's it. Like, wow, you good? Yes, I'm not. Hug. I gotta go play. Okay? It's my daughter who wants to sit down with me and ask about the 4 days in Calgary and how they went, and from like every hour of it. Do you understand? So that particular smile and that particular warmth, that particular feeling I have towards my daughter is just genuinely speaking rare. Right? That protective fitri thing comes there in that particular manner as well. Do you understand that? You see that? Go ahead.
So, I would say my kind of question is, if we're growing up in the West, where I think we're talking about these concepts of freedom, and to me, maybe that would mean like you're allowed to go out more and you're hanging out with friends and stuff like that. So, like, plus like taking into account like this concept of protection, I feel like we as a culture, and like especially in the West, we don't do a good job of protecting our sons and our brothers and stuff like that. Because they go out into the world and they like fall into all these traps and all these pitfalls and like pitfalls. So I'm kind of having, do you guys see where I'm coming
Yes.
from? Like, I understand this need for like they have this physical strength, so then they can have that freedom. But at the same time, I think we fall into these things a lot more than maybe we do in
Yes.
these places. So how does that kind of?
As I told you, that I was just explaining to you the fitri natural flow of the water. And Islam comes and says, this natural flow of water will go this way, but you have to use your aql to make sure it doesn't excessively flow this way. Right? So what ends up happening is naturally they're able to provide that protection for their daughter, but when it comes to the boy, unfortunately they're not able to do that, and the guy ends up doing things and gets involved in circles that, do you understand? So I'm not justifying and validating what's happening at homes. I'm explaining what's happening at homes. Okay? After that, I'm saying that the intellect should come and understand that yes, there is a protective mechanism towards the daughter, and that same protective mechanism is there for the son as well. Sometimes the natural fitrah, if the emotions are left alone without the aql to guard them, there could be exaggerations in one or the other. If you're coming and looking at the whole apple tree as rotten, let's just throw it away, then you're in trouble. Islam is saying, Azam, you have to simply create control mechanism, that's it. Fitratan, your life is in a way where even if you wanted to not be yourself, you can't. Okay? You wanted to not have that particular love, Allah has placed that thing fitratan within you. You understand that point? So, understanding what you have to fix is a precursor to actually fixing it, correct? That's why last talk we had was about understanding the strength in women in the family life. Today's talk is understanding the weakness of having that particular strength in terms of setting up false expectations and in terms of setting up false comparative criterias. Okay? And then the next step can now then be, I'll leave that to you inshallah to talk with the local scholars, there's one right there, right? About how to create that control mechanism now in family units, such that strength and that particular comparative mechanism and expectations are appropriately now brought into family life. You see that? I can only talk about stage 3 if I have stage 1, stage 2 set in understanding at least. Otherwise, if I give you just mechanics of fixing things, I'm simply giving you a fish. And it's great in that one specific scenario, but you have no clue how to apply it anywhere else. That's why I'm trying to help you and assist you in terms of creating a framework of understanding. Understanding what? Emotions, fitra, and family dynamics. Salawat, please. Questions? Yeah, questions? Any? Okay. Any questions? No questions? Okay.
About anything or just?
Sure, anything.
I was wondering, there's like Western standards of what makes like a man, like not necessarily high value, but like a man that has good manners and all that. So what would be his equivalent in an Islamic perspective? Like what qualities when raising a child or a brother to a spouse, like what qualities in a man should be found?
Before I can answer your question, I have to understand what you're comparing it to.
So, like, in Western standards, it's like if a man opens the door, if a man stands up when women come, pleases and thank yous. So, what would be like the equivalent of Islamic perspective?
Okay.
That makes a man not necessarily well mannered, but like I know in Islamic perspective, like when they stand up for when elders come in.
I'd frame your question like this, and it's actually linked to what I said. You're saying basically, in the West, we see the projection of apparent emotional sensitivities in men. Okay? And then if you're saying that this doesn't exist, naturally speaking, in men, but we see it in certain men over here. Okay? But we're not able to see it, perhaps, for example, in other types of men. And what is the Islamic model regarding this emotional sensitivity? Is that what your question is? Right? Okay, I understood your question correctly. There's a few things to understand, which is that an action is not simply the display and the outward aspect of things. An act is a continuation of whatever is happening inside, all the way to whatever happens over there and the effects of it. Okay? When you draw the sun, you just draw a circle, or you draw that rays around it too, right? Which means that in your understanding, the sun is that circle plus the impacts of it too, correct? And when you draw that circle, did you think of it as a hollow thing or an actual full sphere thing, correct? But you weren't able to project that onto a paper, right? But in your understanding and your want of what you were trying to project was actually a full sphere, not a hollow one, correct? So you understood that sun is the outer layer, the effects, and everything within too. You see that? In a similar manner, actions are the same way. That when you have an action, it's the outer layer, the effects, and the inside. All of that is one item. You know that in Salah too. Salah is, if I went and did 2 rakah this way, not for lillah, but for linnas, or for li, na'udhu, right? Which is better than linnas, but still not lillah. Li is still ibadah. But then over here, what ends up happening is, I'm just looking at the outer layer, and then all three of those things seem like the same salah, right? And then you know that's not the case. One is done for Allah, it has a different value. When it's done for myself, it has a different value. When it's done for others, it has a different value too. And how do you know that? It isn't the sun rays. One gives off white light, the other gives off yellowish light, the other doesn't give light at all. See that? Okay. In the same way, when you see the appearance of things that are labeled as etiquettes or emotional considerations, okay, you have to understand that there's an inner aspect of things, the appearance of things, and the effects of things. In the Western understanding, what's the inner motivator that leads to that particular etiquette for a male? And I'm talking about male now, let's say in a high school now, or a university thing.
I would say definitely.
Sorry?
A lot of actions motivated by Western women put together with females or phrases from them.
Okay. That could be one item, and the second item could be the projection of self-image. Okay, which is what then female would be kindly attracted to. Okay, so I'd say the more fundamental item is the projection of self-image, and that's why even in a gathering of all men, a man might dress and be a particular way. You see that? It's the great idol of the Western is the eye, the pharaonic eye. You understand that? And then the pharaonic eye has certain displays to it and effects to it. One of them is the attention of women. Okay, so that particular appearance has a particular backend, and I didn't tell you why men did that. I asked you, correct? Why did I say that? Because if I said it, I'm biased. I asked you. Does anybody disagree with what she said? Anybody think men are opening those doors lillah in the West? Anybody think that? Yeah? Yeah, you think so? They're opening the doors lillah for God. Western men. No, good, alhamdulillah. I would have played ball. That's all I wouldn't mind. So you understand now that the thing which is being displayed is being displayed for a very different reason. Ever been in a relationship or a scenario in your school or somewhere where somebody is doing something and you know they're being conniving? Yes or no? Have you seen that? Meaning that they're pretending to be nice in front of everybody, but you know that they're being this way particular way because they're trying to project that they're not the person at fault, you're the person that's riled up. You see that? How would you look at that particular conniving behavior? Would you be like, oh, what a great behavior, what great ethics they have? You're like, I know what's behind the closed doors, and it's mischief, correct? Okay. I'm suggesting that why is it not the case that you look at men with this real capacity? If the internal aspect is not something that is other than the worship of the self, and that's what's leading to that particular door open, it's a problem. And let's look at the rays too now. We looked at the core of the sun, the appearance of the sun, the opening of the door to sin. And let's look at the rays as well now. What's the impact that particular person is looking for? It's looking for attention, the worship of that particular eye now, right? And if you don't do that, then it knows it has to adjust appropriately. You see that? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Where that man finds now self-value in the way sometimes how women look at him. To the point where when he wants to dress up in the morning, he's not thinking of what's comfy and what's appropriate in terms of he's thinking of what's going to get me the most attention. Here's the fallacy of the pharaonic eye. In an attempt to get others to submit to it, it innately submits to them. Do you understand that? So when it comes time to that type of a man, and it could be a Muslim, it could be a Shia on paper. I don't care. If it's the pharaonic eye, it's the pharaonic eye. Islam teaches that the divine eye inside is something that doesn't do actions out of other than Allah. Story time. Somebody came to Imam Hassan, because it's Shahada, right? And then came to Imam Hassan and said, I want to get my daughter married. Who should I get her married to? So get her married to somebody who's pious. Pious means what? Who's aware of Allah. Okay? Who does things for Allah. Why? Says, because if he likes your daughter, he's not going to oppress her anyway. He likes her. So if he doesn't like her, he still won't oppress her. You see that? Some people look at that and they say that means piety comes only when he doesn't like her. No, no. I was saying in both mannerisms. Even when he likes her for Allah. And then he doesn't like her, he doesn't like her, and that doesn't like also is displayed and so on and so forth with the parameters that Allah has said, and Allah is just. Do you understand that? Okay, so the innards of that particular action is very important. Islam is projecting that a manly man now is a man who displays manliness for Allah. And the effects of that are that I don't care if the whole world thinks that I'm grimy and gross, but I'm going to keep a beard. You see that? The whole Western world can come now and say, you're this and you're that, and I'm going, no, I'm not, I'm a man. You're the one that's loopy. You understand that? That it's no longer looking for a submission of others. It's able to now give a very boring talk, even though it might not have that particular interaction the other way, but you know that this is something that needs to be said here, for example. But you understand too that you have to say it better next time. See that? The divine eye is something that does actions not because of itself. It is at all times attentive of the fact that it is owned. I'm scared of her fingers. Salawat, please. You also have divine eyes too. Okay? Each one of you has an eye, and that particular eye has different faculties to it. Okay? We talked about the daughter and father relationship. You can project the same thing towards the sister and brother relationship. We talked about that as well. Let's get to the husband and wife relationships. Things take a big turn there. Why? If you were to look at all the complexities of relationships that women face, and you put it on a chart, right? You end up seeing that the frictions end up being a lot more in the husband-wife relationships and their displays than the daughter-father and the brother-sister one. Anybody want to say why? I taught it to you. Magnitudes. How much time does husband-wife spend together compared to daughter-father and brother-sister? See that? Naturally speaking, the way is that the magnitude of interaction between those two relationships is a lot greater, okay? And hence the spills in that particular relationship end up displaying at a greater proportion. You see that? If the mechanics of what I've just talked about in today's session are not understood, then if that daughter spent the same amount of time with the father, the same issues would occur. If they spent the same amount of time with brother, a similar level of issues would occur. You understand that? With the husband, an added layer is there. I agree. Okay. What I'm trying to suggest is this: that interaction is something that if you're seeing a lot of displays and friction there, understand that it's stemming from a root item, a root mechanical fix that needs to take place. Understanding of magnitudes of emotions between the two genders, and understanding of projection of expectations between the two genders, and having an intellectual control mechanism in both of those things. Okay, it is 12:32. Okay, at this particular time, I don't want to continue anymore. Okay, I will conclude by a last point, and then I'm going to open it up to your questions. I recommend that you ask questions that actually benefit you. Okay, if they happen to be linked to this talk, inshallah, and if they're not linked to this talk, alhamdulillah, because they're something you're interested in. Okay. Last point I want to say is, what happens if somebody is aware of all this and become the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect sister, and so on and so forth? Just like how the Western guy and the appearance ends up being the perfect man. Is that sufficient, the appearance of things? No. It's important to understand that at all levels of trying to fix a relationship, if it's simply because you want to run away from problems, then you're not doing it for the right reasons at all. Running away from problem was an assistive tool. It wasn't the primary motivator. You understand that? When I want to hold this particular cup and drink a little bit of coffee in it, when I'm thirsty, the liquid aspect of that coffee was the primary motivator. That caffeine that came along with it was an assisted benefit. Do you see that? If it was water, it would have been better right now. But you see what I'm trying to say? Okay. So the primary motivator in overcoming our hardships is not the putting away of fire. The primary motivator in the putting away of hardships is the same thing that I mentioned for the man. It has to be for Allah. Nothing else. It has to be because I'm an owned creature. Why for Allah? Not because Allah benefits me, because I'm owned. I'm owned as you know. It has to stem from this particular identity. If it's anything other than that, you're in trouble. Even if you reach the finish line. That's it. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajma'in. Thank you for having so much patience with me today. Questions? Go ahead.
So there was a point brought up saying that you don't have
Can you use the mic?
Oh,
What will happen is then the sisters around can listen as well easily.
So the point was brought up that men aren't protected as enough as they should as well, right? And I feel like if someone is, men and women is someone who's being protected too much, they start to lack experience, right? So what's like a balance where you can, and especially during early childhood as well, I feel like it's important to build like emotional, I feel like experience as well. So what would be a good balance without throwing someone out in the world, but also providing them with experience as well to handle
Really good.
different situations?
Really good. Does a mother protect her infant the same way she protects her toddler?
No.
Does she protect her toddler the same way she protects her teenager? How about when the child becomes of marrying age? Protects the same way as the previous stage? How about when the child is now older? The protection does stay the same? Protection is there in all those phases, right? But the intensity is a mechanism which the fitra innately has. Okay, the intellect is supposed to come and adjust the. It's supposed to grow. A tree grows naturally, right? A good person who he just prunes the tree, correct? The intellect is supposed to come and just prune that particular fitri thing within you. Do you understand that? And in pruning it, it's making it balanced and pure. Does that make sense? So the answer to that particular thing is your fitra, right? At different phases of life, in different situations, a parent would understand at what level that particular child needs assistance. Let me give you an explicit example to make you understand this better. I have two sons. One son is frail and very emotional. Another son, let's say, is a thug. Okay? The mannerism of protection will be different. I know this guy is very intellectually smart and he won't start fights. Okay? I know that guy, if he doesn't start a fight, I'll be worried. This is not his normal. You understand? So my mannerism of protection regarding those two individuals will be person specific. And fitratan, I'll feel that. I don't have to think and plan and write a calculation anywhere here or there. My fitra, my love itself finds displayed for this particular person in accordance to this, and for that particular person in accordance to that. My aql just comes and prunes that. Does that make sense? You see that?
Yeah, basically like a vine or like a tree, and a parent just makes sure it grows in a certain way.
That's right. But how can you prune? You can only prune as clearly as you have eyesight, correct? If I'm blind, I end up, instead of pruning this way, I prune this way. Right? And that's why knowledge is important in different phases. What is the role of the parent? What is the role of the sibling? What is the role of the mother? What is the role of the father? What is the role of the wife and the husband? Knowledge is important because it gives you eyesight regarding what to prune. You see that? But understand, knowledge is at some levels generic in its nature. Correct? When you're getting it from me, whatever I'm saying a generalized understanding, correct? The application of that knowledge in your actual 24 hours is not a generalized item at all. It's a specific item, correct? So the translator of that generalized knowledge into the specific is what? It's your capacity and your intellect. You see that? That's why we could all be before the Holy Quran itself, and the Quran gives at its level, but we all only take at our level and only implement at our level and understanding as well. You see that? Okay. So, having said this, this is why you'll notice that at various stages of the world, in various parts of the world, in various generations, different types of problems will be rampant in cultures and societies based on the level of darkness in each society. Darkness meaning the lack of knowledge. You see that? Zalamtu nafsi is something which is very real, proportionate to what? The lack of knowledge that I have of my actual I, the owned I. See that? If I have that, if I'm saying that about myself, that means I'm saying that about my family unit too. Every family unit that the participants of that don't know what their roles are supposed to do for one another at some level, at whatever level jahl exists for them, they're going to have problems, right? Those trees won't be pruned appropriately. Okay? Is it the case that the family unit will just die? No. We have family units in the West, correct? It just won't be pruned gardens. Does that make sense? Pruning, is that harder or growing the garden? Thank God pruning is easier. Okay? Meaning that once you have an understanding of going towards Allah, you take one step towards Him, He takes 10 towards you. That's what it means. Once you have an understanding of now what to do and prune, and you go towards pruning, Allah has assisted you there. It's a lot easier to prune than to actually grow. He's left the growing to the fitrah and the pruning to the aql. Does that make sense? Okay? Because the fitrah, it doesn't leave you. It's how you are. But the aql requires a willful progression. Where we started this talk. Please don't let the lectures be your only way of learning. See that? Any other? Did I answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Can you pass the mic to her for a second?
So we understand the daughter needs protection. So I don't understand why.
Why?
Why we need protection? Why I need permission of my husband
Yes.
to go somewhere?
Yes.
Why I have to follow man's in my prayer?
Yes.
Why there is difference, right? I understand there is. We are emotionally strong and maybe physically not enough strong, but you know, in our world now, before in I understand in the time of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the woman doesn't work and they need protection. But nowadays, I'm working even more than my husband, right? I'm gaining money more than my husband. So why I need to follow my husband and ask permission? Why Islam wants to protect me? I'm working like a man.
Yeah.
It is not more than a man. So why I need protection? I'm strong.
Yes.
I don't need protection. Thank you.
Jazakallah. It's a really good question. I really appreciate that you asked that. I was hoping that somebody did ask that. Okay. And the start of the answer to this particular question we initiated in the last discussion. I would encourage you to listen to the last discussion if it's a genuine question. Okay? And I'll summarize some aspects of that and build onto the answer for today. Very important. I am a department head in an institution. Okay? I am the online department head. Okay? That other brother over there is the department head of academic affairs, and that person over there is the department head of research affairs. Okay? The institution in of itself is a mechanism, right, where different parts have to play different roles for it to be able to be functional. See that? Okay. If as the department head of the online faculty of that particular institution, one of my roles is to ensure that whatever that department and that department needs in terms of IT, I provide those assistances, correct? In that mechanism, would I have to wait for them to tell me their need, or should I dictate to them what they need? Normally speaking. Tell me.
I didn't get your questions.
In that particular department, I am the person responsible for providing the IT needs of that institution. And that is the academic department, and this is the research department. Normally speaking, would I go to them and say, here's what you need, and here's what you need? Or would they come to me and say, we need this? Which one would be leader in the response mechanism of me helping them? Typically speaking, it'd be them, right? Because they know their particular needs, and then they would have to come towards my department and say, can your department provide us 3 laptops and internet connection and this and that here and there? And then once they gave that to me, then I would go to my department and figure out a way of providing that particular need, correct? Yes? If at that particular time one of my employees came to me and said, you're their follower. Okay? You're their follower. See, you're behind them. They had to give you a list to do, and now you're doing it. What would I respond to that employee of mine?
So you need to answer their need, not dictate, right? So if you
No, they dictated to me. They said, we want 3 laptops and a projector set up for XYZ day. Thank you very much.
So imagine you provide them 3 computers, so they can use it because they need laptop.
Sure.
So you need to answer their needs.
Okay. So what I would do is I'd tell the person that, listen, it's not that they're my boss, but in the mechanism of this institution working, right? You have to have a display of need to meet it appropriately. I simply don't understand what they need because I'm not that department head, correct? So sometimes that particular department will have to be able to project and display certain things, and they have to have been given that authority by the dean, right? And then I have to understand that in the overall mechanics of this family unit of ours, right? I'm the head of my department head. Simply getting that list of needs from them does not make them above me. They're the same department head on the same level as me. All of us are under the dean. You see that? But if it was the case that my expectation was that I should tell them what their needs is, it should be based on what I want, I'd be in trouble. Correct? But this much expectation is true, that they shouldn't, if I only have 10 laptops and they come and tell me, I want 50 laptops, I'd say you're crazy, right? I don't have 50 laptops. You see that? Or if they called me 2 a.m. saying I want laptops for 8 a.m. class tomorrow, I'd say, I wouldn't even pick up the phone. Actually, you understand? Okay, so this much understanding is there. But when they do give me that particular list of their needs, I tell my department that, well, I am the department head leader. They're not above me, I'm not below them, but the mechanics of a functional institution requires a projection of a need and then the response of it. Yes or no? Okay. The same thing works in your physical body too, correct? When your stomach feels like it's a little bit hungry and it needs food, it relays and sends a command to your mind, correct? Your head, sorry, brain, correct? And then that brain then starts to create some actions and some secretions such that now you start to feel the hunger, correct? What if someone said, the stomach is controlling the brain? What would you tell them? No, no. The mechanics of that particular body is such that the stomach has to do its part, and in the reverse mechanism, the brain has to do its particular part, correct? And the overall mechanics ends up being that the brain is known or seen as a controller. However, in the explicit example that I showed you, in this instance, which one was the controller? The stomach, because it first sent the signal. Do you see that? But in the overall mechanics, you have to overlook that. Why? Because you're looking at things from a generalized manner, generalized role manner, correct? Okay, all this stuff of institutions aside. When you're looking at now the family unit, okay, there are certain needs that the male fitra has that the female fitra certainly does not have. And there's certain needs that the female fitra has that the male department certainly does not have. And Allah then comes and says that each department has to project their needs list to the other. Does that make sense? Okay? And then once that particular needs list is projected to the other department head, the other department head has to also then provide that particular thing. But who's the dean of every family unit? It's Allah. You know the proof of that? Because Allah said, if the male sends you a list that goes against me, don't do it. Does that make sense? If it was the case that the deen of every family unit was just the male, then the deen would say, whatever the male says, goes. Do you understand that? Do you understand that? So the male is not the deen of that particular family unit at all. Neither is the female. But each are department heads of their own fitrah. Does that make sense? It's their responsibility to project what their needs are and communicate what their needs are to the other person. When does friction happen? When they didn't send me the letter saying that they need 4 laptops. I didn't know, Hazrat Jibreel didn't come to me, right? And then 4 laptops weren't presented. And then what ends up happening? Friction happens. Yes or no? Alhamdulillah, it's not the case for us. I'm giving you an example. Does that make sense? So at any level that there is a lack of communication of your fitri needs towards the other person, who's to blame? In that class set unit, the institution unit, if they didn't send me the number of laptops needed for tomorrow's seminar, and tomorrow's seminar everybody's there and laptops aren't there, who's going to be blamed? Somebody who's not very intellectual might come and blame me. Okay? But the deen will blame them. Does that make sense? So did you project the need first or no? Does that make sense or no? Okay? So the manager of the projection of needs and the communication of it is only the department head themselves. So now the male and the female are now the department heads who are supposed to project their needs towards the other person. Okay? And then the other person can now relay those things. Coming to the specific examples you gave. Okay? Specific examples you gave. In the deen, a male is told that if it's the case that you have your wife's physical protection, you have to choose between that or yourself getting killed. Which one is the wajib on the male? Does he say, it's okay, I'm living, my wife, just her honor is taken away, it's okay, now. No. The deen, okay, tells the male that if it was to be in terms of protection of honor of your family unit, in terms of the females that are over there, your wife in particular, if it comes to a time where you have to choose that you die and so on and so forth, and their honor gets protected, then Azizna, you must die. Wassalam. Do you understand that? And to assist in that, it says, okay, I will give you some control because I'm asking this responsibility of you. Therefore, I also allow you to let your wife know when she can leave. Does that make sense? But I'm going to put a control mechanism there. I'm also going to tell you, عاشرن بالمعروف. Live with them in a particular manner which is pleasing and nice. If you use this permission of leaving the house as a mechanism of hurt and pain, while I provided it to you for a very different reason, you see that? I'm going to get you. Let me explain to you in the institutional mechanics manner. In an institution, each department has a certain date until which they have to actually relay to the other department their needs. Okay? It can't be 24 hours. Okay? And that date is typically designed for each project based off of the type of stuff they need. You understand that? If they need 50 posters made and the entire projection made of something, then that particular thing I need at least 2-3 months for. You see that? If I get that the night before, I simply can't do it. If I notice that every single time they're only giving me that particular list at the last moment of their allowed time, okay, I have a right to complain to the Deen and say they're sometimes giving me a first draft at the last moment and amending it later on too, and it creates problems for me. And if God forbid they're doing it to hurt me, right? I could say that to the Deen too. The Deen will notice a pattern, and what will he do? He'll probably reprimand them, correct? Yes or no? Okay. The Deen gave an allowance out of a real reason, which is that they do need time to give that particular communication to me, right? And he made it in an appropriate way. But because of free will, everything given to you can be a weapon or a tool. Yes? Everything. Everything. Tongue, a weapon or a tool. Eye, weapon or a tool. You see that? Even facial features, weapon or a tool. Okay? Thought, weapon or a tool. Emotions, weapon or a tool. Weapon meaning pharaonic eye, tool meaning divine eye. You see that? Not meaning that sometimes the divine eye is you need to make it a weapon. You see that? And the pharaonic eye is a flower which was not supposed to be a flower. Does that make sense? That's a weapon. Okay. So in that relationship, Allah told the male, I'll give permission, because I'm telling you that if there's anything to do with the honor of your family, okay, is rape something which only existed in the time of the Holy Prophet, or does it exist today too? Tell me. Is rape, sexual harassment, something that existed only in the time of the Holy Prophet, or does it exist today as well? Okay, I'm a counselor. Okay, in the West, out of 10 individuals, okay, more than 2, I won't say the actual number, more than 2 will claim that they have undergone or experienced some level of sexual harassment. You understand that? You understand that? Okay. If I was to project to you an understanding of sexual harassment in the time of the Prophet, was that higher or is it higher now? Over there, they were very protective of women in their tribes, correct? Yes? You understand that? And the Arab ghira was an insane thing too. You understand that? A little bit too much. You can see it now. Bedouins don't go to the weddings of their daughters sometimes because the ghira is messed up. Okay. So if I was to look at the thing that I've told the male that you have to die for it if it's the case, you have to protect, then I've also then allowed for that particular allowance, and then it makes sense to allow for it more today than back then. Does that make sense? In an apartment unit, when you're living and you don't know everybody in your apartment, who's a pedophile and who's not, you understand? Was that the case in the Prophet's time? Even go back 30 years, it wasn't the case. You see that? As the shahwat faculty is becoming more and more infectious, it becomes more and more apparent why the male is told, you're allowed now to say, don't leave the house. Does that make sense? And fitratan, every man picks a house that is secure. You understand that? Okay. Does that mean the man owns you? Tell me. No, I want you to play. I know. I want you to play the devil's advocate, or if you can't, I want somebody else to play it the best way they can. Okay? Does that mean that the man owns you? Yes. Okay. Ahsan, good job. Yes, the man owns you in that one particular decision. Are you that decision to leave and nothing else? No. In that department head relationships, did they command me when they gave me a list? Yes. But am I everything, including just that particular, my entire identity, just that particular list environment with them, or interaction with them? No. There's so much more. That's one aspect of a greater mechanism, right? When you tell your husband that I need to go visit this friend, okay? Do you own that man? In that particular projection of need, you do, because you're saying that you do this, you're commanding, right? You're requesting, but at the end of the day, it's, you understand what I'm trying to say? I need meat today to cook food. If he shows up without food, are you like, oh, I just asked, it's okay? Or when he shows up without the meat, you're like, I know I'm going to make a ground meat in a different way today. You know what I'm trying to say? So when that happens to me often, I forget to come home like, oh yeah, my hands were supposed to be full. So what ends up, alhamdulillah, my wife is nice. I don't get ground meat. I just get sent back. In that particular interaction, it is an order. But if you were to simply understand ownership in that sliver, it's a disproportionate understanding of ownership. Yes or no? And that's why we say Allah owns everything. Why? Is Allah a sliver of your aspects of ownership? Imagine your man owns an aspect of what you own. Or even forget that, go further, you own your own decisions, correct? If that was true, right, and there was something which was a second for the one, which is Allah owns you too, you'd be in trouble. You see that? You'd be like, who owns me? I own myself or Allah owns myself? But I chose to drink this cup right here. I'm the owner of that action, but I'm saying Allah owns me too, means He owns that action too. How do I mesh those two? That was the first discussion we had. Go listen to that, please. Okay? Phone's about to die? I'm about to die too, don't worry. Everybody has their own battery life. This unique part about the phone is it displays the battery life, and every other battery doesn't display it. Okay? Does that answer the question regarding the leaving the house portion? Second level of understanding is the understanding of I earn more money, and if I have more financial strength, then that means I should own the house. Imagine in that same institution, I was the financial department. And I came to the dean and I said, because I'm the financial department, I own the institution. I get slapped up and put to the side. Inshallah. You understand that? The slap is out of mercy. Deen is very nice. Rahmahullah wa khair. You understand that? So simply providing one aspect to the mechanism does not make you the owner of that mechanism. Is money the only thing that a house runs on? Some of the worst houses are the houses of the rich. You understand? Some of the worst houses are the houses of individuals who have too much money. So a house runs on a lot more. What if a lady came and said, I provide the love in the house, I own the house, and the love is more than money. I could live in a poor house, but I can't live in a hatred-filled house. And because I provide the love of the house, I own the house. You see that? That mechanics of thinking is innately defective. Yes or no? Make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. In certain aspects, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave authority to certain genders. You understand that? That is not a sign of greatness. He did not create a class 1 citizen creature and a class 2 citizen creature and told them both to come to Him at the same speed. Not the case. You see that? But He did create a mechanism that has to work together. What that means is, in certain slivers, one person ends up seeing and seems to have control and authority, and other slivers, the other person seems to have authority. You understand that? I give a lot of counseling. You go to a guy and say, why is your life upside down? That's because my wife is upside down. You understand that? We have so much fights at home. I can't study, I can't work, and I can't teach, and I can't I can't even go to the gym, I can't do anything. Okay? You understand that? Who controls who in that situation? Tell me. Tell me. You have emotional chain, because you're strength, right? You have emotional chains wrapped around the other gender. Understand that at every phase. And you have the capacity to utilize those chains. And if you do it inappropriately, that other person feels controlled and owned. Vice versa. Does that make sense? A true family unit understands that the deen is actually Allah, and He's allowed for slivers of control to let the mechanism flow. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question in a way that you felt was appropriate? Okay. Salawat, please. Okay. Any other questions? Any questions? Yes.
So in the West, there's always this concept of like embracing your flaws, that kind of thing. But in Islam, obviously, like the concept of working towards like perfection, right? If we always have like, if every strength carries like a proportionate weakness, does that mean Islam's concept of perfection is rooted more in balance versus flawlessness? And this idea of like embracing your weakness or embracing your flaws, is that like a concept, or is it more like understanding it, or are they kind of the same thing or not?
Ahsant. Usul Kafi, the first book, is quite interesting. It's about aql. Okay. There's a hadith there where Allah creates the aql and then it tells it to come forth, comes forth, tells it to go back, goes back. Basically, what the meaning behind this is that an aql obeys reality. Okay, it is innately submissive and is in the state of sajda towards reality at all times. It is an existence which never leaves sajda towards haqq. Never. Okay? And it's in its fullest form in sajda and at all levels, basically. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told that aql that I will give benefits based off of you and azabs and deficiencies based off of you too. Meaning that when it comes time to now a particular person's rubric, it's person specific. My expectation of a 2-year-old, how high they should be able to jump, is different than a 20-year-old, how high they can jump. You see that? So perfection in every phase is different. If I project perfection in a singular manner at all phases, that's when you see parents thinking that the perfection in kids is to not run around and to not play and to not be riled up. But that's not the perfection of that phase. You see that? That's where you might see Tullab who project and think that the perfection in the West would be to live a talabi lifestyle here. But that would be obscure and unbelievable, because that would be like expecting a Superman out of a toddler. You see what I'm trying to say? Can't. Okay? The perfection has to be previewed in its own appropriate way. I would expect to come to the West, and I would expect to see Western flaws. And that's the reality. It's the understanding of them at that particular level that I have to develop. If I get frustrated with a child because they're being a child, that's a me problem. If I as a Taliban become frustrated coming to the West because I'm seeing the West as the West, it's a me problem, Aziz Dilam. Does that make sense? Okay? Otherwise the Holy Prophet would be frustrated in the world at every level. He wasn't. Because I guarantee you, proportionately speaking, the flaws the Holy Prophet saw in the West, in the world, right, are far greater than the flaws I see in even the worst of communities in the West. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because his understanding of reality is greater. So that which has been asked of you is always within your grasp, never more. So based on your current understanding and the tools that you have within yourselves, can you prune the tree of fitra that you have with you? One of those tools is the intellect, which tells you go learn and seek knowledge from others too. Right? Again, at your level. If you can spare an hour a day, an hour a day. And if you can spare an hour a week, based on your life phase. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question about perfection? Sure. So it's not the case that something beyond your capacity is asked of you. That's why the prophets could say, that old lady is my neighbor at my level, for example. For example, or if somebody does this, then they are my jar. They're my neighbor, for example. Neighbor meaning like proximity in some aspects, right? A neighbor is proximate to you in the appearance of things, correct? Not in everything, right? Just because your neighbors doesn't mean you have the same values, right? Okay, so the neighbors doesn't necessarily mean the exact absolute level, it just means proximation at certain levels. Okay, when can that happen? Because even that's unfathomable for somebody to have with the Prophet, let alone the Prophet of Allah. Okay, when can that happen? It can happen only when the criteria is person specific. You see that? One unique point to appreciate. I told you, as great as the magnitude of something becomes, the derailment and the shadow becomes that great too, correct? Consider the Holy Prophet. It's not that he's perfect without free will. You understand that? It's not the case. It's when can he expect you to be able to prune your tree when he has actually pruned the highest level of a tree? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Do you see that? I'm not bringing it out of my pocket. We have riwayat that talk about the Holy Prophet's strength being the strength of X number of men, and his shahwa faculty being the shahwa of X number of men too. And that's why even in our ahkam you see that distinction. There's a ahkam ruling which is specific to the Prophet, that's not specific to anybody else, which is the number of wives he could have. You see that? You see that or no? Allah is not unjust, not a favoritism at play. Holy Prophet pruned that particular magnitude of perfection and capacities at that particular level. out of free will. And then we find ourselves humble before Him in reality. You see that? Okay. Every step we take in our life in this matter now is in the footstep of the Holy Prophet. You see that? With this understanding. Okay. Did I answer your question a little bit? I took the time to the Holy Prophet as a shahada as well. I want to kind of give an appreciation of the Prophet at whatever level you could. Any other questions? If not, we end the session now. Any other questions? Question? Yeah, go ahead.
So it's
Can you have a mic or talk louder?
sorry. So it's kind of going back to what we were talking about with. So I have two questions. So there's the reason where it's like you talked about how the greater the magnitude of something, the greater like the kind of shadow side, I guess you could say, or like the derailing of that thing. So
The impact of the derailing.
yeah, and then you also have to like manage kind of your expectations with that thing. Like for example, if you're expecting something from your father or your brother and they don't do that, but then the fact that the internal turmoil is also kind of proportionate to that thing. So how do you balance that need to feel like cared for with that entire like emotional turmoil kind of thing?
Yes.
And then also I'm kind of having a hard time because I know you mentioned that like the emotional strength, the equivalence is kind of the physical strength for men. So does that mean that they have to deal with that like every single day, the same way we kind of deal with our emotions every single day, or is it not really like the equivalence that I'm thinking of?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Look at men, when it comes to the display of shahwa, their display is very quick, according to riwayat, and you see that as well in fitra, correct? The same thing occurs in the display of ghadab too. It's not the case that a person has great control over shahwa and horrible control over ghadab. The control mechanism is the intellect, correct? And the capacities of that, and so on and so forth. Fitratan, if you notice a man who has not developed the intellect, you'll see that the displays of shahwa end up being greater than the sisters, right? And display meaning the external display. Otherwise, if you were to look at display in its actual sense, the sisters are still greater, because display, if it includes the inner feelings and the inner thoughts, because of that magnitude, is displayed there, right? Every reality is displayed in itself, right? Mahiya of everything is in niya, in its like the quiddity of everything is itself sometimes, okay? For every item. You understand that at some level. Meaning that the emotion that you have, it is, right? And hence it's displayed, where? At least inside of you, correct? So the display is not of the internal self that I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about the display outside, what others see now, the projection of it externally, okay? We see that when it comes to shahwa, the projection of shahwa for men is greater, right? You see that? The same thing occurs for the projection of ghadab for them too, by the way. So they have a hard time in the sense that it's like that person who constantly makes spelling mistakes, right? Writing an essay for that particular person becomes very difficult, right? So if a man has he has lower magnitudes of intensities to control, but higher quantities of areas to control. Okay? Gets riled up easily sometimes. Able to display anger and upsetness really easily sometimes. Does that make sense? Okay? There's a lot more there to say as well, but I want to suffice at that particular phase, because if I open the Pandora's box where I want to take it, then it will not end here. Okay? So that's all I can answer. I'm sorry for now. Any other questions? Any other questions? No? Salawat, please. As with every discussion, I always end the discussion with requesting you to answer one of my questions, which is that what did you specifically now, not your daughter, your mother, your sister, you specifically learn today? Okay? And if you learn nothing today, you say, I learned nothing new today. Why? Because it tells me that I have to try harder. This is an assistive tool for myself. This mechanism helps me grow, right? Right? I spend an hour and something trying to help you grow, and I'm saying, please help me grow. So your participation is something that really benefits me, and that's why I'm asking, very humble. Okay? Which direction can we start from? Can we get the mic to go over here? So I think the other side has an on button on it. The top of it, where the wires are. There you go. This one. Yeah. What did you learn today?
I learned that both people have like different, both kind of like what you said, they're both different departments that impact.
Okay. Both are department heads of different departments of one institution.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like they can't take
Where the dean is God.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really good. Thank you so much.
I learned that a woman can use her emotions as a strength and also as a weakness, and it really depends on how she uses it.
Ahsan. Every blessing from Allah, every mai that the eye has been given, can either be a weapon or a tool, right? Ahsan. If it's